tribal-specific program that the commission might want. And then lastly, it's the tribe's program to administer and enforce the Clean Air Act programs or rules and standards that the commission has adopted. Next slide, please. On this slide, I'm going to talk a bit about the different Clean Air Act authorities that the tribe currently has, and also a program we're trying to take. And then I'm also going to talk about just the oil and gas industry in La Plata County, and talk about this map that's up here on the right-hand side of the slide a little bit. But first, I'll talk about the delegated Clean Air Act programs and standards that the tribe currently has. So the tribe, as of right now, has what's called a Title V operating permit program. We also have what's called the Resource Performance Standards and Maximum Achievable Control Technology Standards. And what those standards are is those are rules that regulate both criteria pollutants and hazardous air pollutants at all of the different sources on the reservation. So the tribe has basically adopted the standards that are relevant to the sources on the reservation, and that jurisdiction extends over all of the different industrial sources on the reservation. And then programs that the tribe is currently working to receive are the Tribal Minor Resource Review Program and the Federal Implementation Plan for True Minor Oil and Gas Sources in Indian Country. And we'll talk about all of these different programs in more depth on the next slides. But the next thing I just want to talk about is just the different sources that we have on the reservation. And I think as the Health Board is probably aware, oil and gas is the largest industry on the reservation and is responsible for the majority of industrial emissions that occur within La Plata County. And for that reason, it's really oil and gas is the main focus of our regulatory programs. But going back to this map up here on the right side, I just want to give some numbers about how many industrial sources we have on the reservation and how many we have relative to La Plata County as a whole. So approximately 85% of the oil and gas infrastructure within La Plata County is located within the reservation boundaries, so really the majority of it. And this map up here on the right-hand side of the slide shows all of the different producing oil and gas wells in La Plata County, which these numbers are from last year, but they're pretty current. As of last year, there was 2,570 of the 2,932 wells located in La Plata County were within the reservation. So big chunk of them. And then 34 of the 34 major sources, also known as Title V sources, within La Plata County are on the reservation. And another just interesting statistic on that is the tribe's got approximately 13 of all the Title V sources in the state of Colorado are on the reservation, so it's significant. And with that, I think I'll move on to the next slide and talk about these programs in more depth. As I mentioned before, the Title V program, this is pretty much the main Clean Air Act program that the tribe administers right now. And it's really one of two core Clean Air Act programs that exist under the Clean Air Act. One type of permitting program is a resource review program, and that's what's called a construction permit program, and that's for the sources have to get a pre-construction permit, as the name implies, prior to constructing or making a modification to a source. The Title V program, on the other hand, is an operating permit program, and it's for existing sources that are already in operation, which are considered major sources under the Clean Air Act definition. And that's any source that has the potential to emit 100 tons per year of any single criteria pollutant. Criteria pollutant being oxides of nitrogen, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, or particulate matter. or 10 tons of any single hazardous air pollutant, or 25 tons of any combined hazardous air pollutant. So that's basically the criteria for being a major source. But going back on that, the tribe received delegation of the program in 2012, and it's noteworthy to mention that the tribe was the first in the nation to receive delegation, full delegation of a Title V program, and remains to this day the only tribe that we know of delegation. And just to describe a little bit what a Title V program is, it's in general terms a catch-all permit program. It takes all the sources already applicable requirements and it puts them all in one permit. And the idea behind this, when EPA developed the program, was really just the idea that putting all the sources requirements into one single permit would help the operators stay in compliance with all of their different assortment of Clean Air Act requirements. And it would also help the public understand every requirement that the source is required to do. And then some other real notable features of the Title V program are that it requires the source operator to conduct an annual self-audit where they go through their permit and detail whether they were compliant or non-compliant with every single term of that permit, including the timeframes of non-compliance and reasons behind non-compliance, and if they came back into compliance and all those kind of details. And so that's a really good kind of self-policing component of the program, and that report needs to be submitted to the permit authority every year. And then another thing I'll just mention is the program also provides a little bit of additional authority to the permit authority, in that the permit authority can add enhanced monitoring, record keeping, or reporting for any applicable requirements of the permit, where in the permit authority's opinion, the rule in itself is lacking in monitoring, record keeping, and reporting, which would be sufficient to determine compliance. So that's kind of a description of the Title V operating permit program. But within the tribe taking over that delegation, the tribe got the authority to issue permits. And so again, we've got 34 facilities right now. It also provided the authority to do compliance inspections. So the tribe inspects these sources once every other year through an EPA approved plan. And to date, our program's completed over 150 inspections. And just something significant with that, and I'll talk about this multiple times today, is that when the EPA had jurisdiction for the Title V program on the reservation, they were not doing inspections at this frequency, and definitely not to the depth that the tribe does. And then the final feature is the tribe has civil enforcement authority. So the tribe enforces for non-compliance with the terms of a permit, and we do that in-house. And to date, we've done over 40 cases, so it's been significant. Next slide, please. And one of the things I really just want to emphasize today is that I think from my perspective, one of the main real benefits of the tribe taking on the Title V program is that we've really had an increase in compliance since we took over. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this graph up here and how we kind of have metrics to back up that claim. But this graph up here starts in 2015 and goes through 2023, and the yellow bars on there are what we call formal enforcement, and the green bars are what we call informal enforcement. And now those yellow bars, the formal enforcement, these are a higher degree of severity of enforcement actions, and the reason why is they usually include violations that are more likely to cause real environmental harm, and they also often include larger numbers of violations. And these formal enforcement actions also always include a civil penalty that we determine using the EPA's civil penalty policy. Now, these informal enforcement actions with the green bars, these are enforcement actions that in general include violations that were unlikely to have caused environmental harm, smaller numbers of violations, and they also include no civil penalty. So you can kind of see a trend on here where when the tribe started doing enforcement actions, we were having a large number of formal enforcement actions, and that's kind of changed now to us not really having any formal enforcement actions and higher number of informal actions. So we just see that trend as illustrating that the operators on the reservation with Title V permits are doing a better job staying in compliance with all their permit terms, and we're really not finding anything significant at this point. And before we move on from this slide, I just want to mention, because I think it's significant, a recent enforcement action that the tribe just settled here right at the end of 2023 in December. And that was a case against the Williams companies and Harvest Midstream for non-compliance with the Clean Air Act at the Ignacio gas plant located south of Durango on the reservation. And this case was different in that we weren't the lead on it. It was a case that was led by the Department of Justice and the EPA. It's what they call a global settlement, which is a settlement where they basically group multiple enforcement actions into a single case, just for simplicity of settling it. But the case included 15 different Williams facilities across several states, and the tribe was approached about it back in 2019, and we chose to join as a co-plaintiff because we were independently pursuing non-compliance at that facility that related to the process flare, and we felt like it was a good opportunity to increase our leverage in getting the settlement that we wanted. And that was like it was a 5-year process, and it just settled here in December, and it resulted in Harvest having to install a new continuous monitoring system on their flare, which will demonstrate that flare is operated correctly into the future. And that's really a success for not just the tribe, but all residents of Southwest Colorado. And really the reason why is that's a huge emission point. It's got the potential to emit over 600 tons of volatile organic compounds if operated incorrectly. So the fact that the tribe was able to collaborate with the Department of Justice and EPA on that and get the result that we wanted out of that was just really a huge success that I wanted to highlight. Let's move on to the next slide. The next program I want to discuss is the Tribal Minor Resource Review Program. This is a program that the tribe is in the process of receiving delegation. We went through a stakeholder process for several years, which included Plata County and all the interested stakeholders. And at the direction of the commission, the commission told the tribe's air program to apply for delegation of that program back in 2020. And as the name implies, these sources are in general smaller than the major sources that the tribe currently regulates through Title V. But notable is that due to there being more minor sources on the reservation, cumulatively these sources emit larger quantities of pollutants than the major sources. And upon delegation, the tribe would have the ability to regulate approximately an additional 240 sources. And this is really significant because right now, these sources don't have any compliance oversight by the EPA. They've never been inspected since these facilities started operating, sometimes decades ago. And we really like to think that the tribe picking up and doing this work will yield the same kind of compliance increasing compliance trend that we saw with the Title V program. So aside from the tribal sovereignty aspect, again, this is I feel like a really important program for us to take on. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk about our ambient air monitoring program and our reasons for doing that. And just really want to highlight this program because it's a great resource for the Board of Health to know about. So the tribe operates 3 air monitoring stations on the reservation. One is on the east side of the reservation near Lake Capote. One is right in the town of Ignacio. And the third is over by Bondad Hill. And the tribe's real focus is monitoring ozone and also particulate matter. And then we also do oxides of nitrogen, which is relevant to, it's something that you want to do in addition to ozone. But really our main focus, the most common air quality issue that we see on the reservation is particulate matter just from the forest fires. So that's one that we've really keyed in on. And then ozone, I'll talk about a little bit more, is also important. Next slide, please. This is just, I'll show this slide real quick. It's just shows the location of our 3 different air monitoring stations on the reservation. Next slide, please. Move through this slide real quick. This slide just shows the areas that our monitors cover. And so ozone covers a good chunk of Plata County and also Archuleta County. And ozone being a regional pollutant, you really don't see big variations across a region the size of Plata County. So we do a really good job serving that area. PM is a little different in that PM is usually a lot more localized to based on meteorological conditions, or if there's a local PM source like a forest fire or something. Next slide, please. This slide is this slide is focused on ozone, and as I mentioned, ozone is really, from a regulatory perspective, the pollutant that we pay the most attention to. The national standard is 70 parts per billion, and we have historically, for about the last decade, we've had values of ozone that are within the mid to pretty much the mid 60s, and we really watch that close just to make sure we don't get close to the standard of 70. And you know, it can look as though values in the 60s are really close to the standard, but in reality it would take a really dramatic shift in ozone precursor emissions to really tip the scales. So right now we don't really have any concern with exceeding the 70 part per billion standard, but it is definitely a main goal of the tribe's air quality planning activities to keep a good eye on the sources and quantities of ozone precursor emissions, those emissions being oxides of nitrogen and volatile organic compounds. And how we do that is through triennial regulatory grade emission inventories, where we really identify the source of ozone precursor emissions and the quantities. And that's just really a critical tool for developing goals or strategies to reduce ozone precursor emissions, should there ever be a need. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, particulate matter is really by far the most commonly occurring cause of bad air in La Plata County. You're all aware that we have a lot of forest fires, both in the west and locally, that can cause smoke in the air, and we also have dust storms in the spring. And so we do continuous particulate monitoring, and we have that information available on our website with a corresponding EPA air quality index, which is basically like a color-coded, simplistic health forecast that helps the public make decisions about, you know, whether they want to stay inside that day or if they feel fine going out with their kids and playing in the park or whatever. But that's a really important thing, is the PM monitoring. It's a great service that we provide to the community. Next slide, please. And this slide right here, I'm providing this just to show some good resources. And I think this is really important, again, to the Board of Health. This air monitoring program the tribe implements is just a really, really valuable tool for the community. The tribe's really the only one doing air monitoring in this region, and the fact that anybody from the community can just get on this website and see what the current pollutant levels are and the corresponding EPA health forecast is just an amazing service that the tribe provides. And that's our website right here on the left. And then on the right side is the EPA AirNow website, which has the EPA Air Quality Index for all of the different monitors within the US and even around the world. Next slide, please. Oh, it looks like that concludes my section, but we can chat more about questions later. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. So again, my name is Mandy Eskelson. I'm the Water Quality and Remediation Division Head, and so nested under the Environmental Programs Department, we have the Air Quality Division, as well as the Water Quality and Remediation Division. And so I'm going to be describing the several water quality and remediation programs that I help oversee, as well as several delegated authorities, mainly under the Clean Water Act. And so as you can see from this slide, this provides a general timeline of various programs that the tribe has received treatment in a similar manner as a state from the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as delegated authority. And so you can see a lot has happened over the past 3 decades, and these numbers, 106, 319, 518, 401, those are all in reference to sections under the Clean Water Act. And so 106 it started way back in 1993, focusing on water pollution control. And I'll go into more details of these programs in further slides, as well as the 319 program that has more of a focus on non-point source pollution. And then jumping into 2018, that's when the tribe received treatment as a state to develop and eventually implement water quality standards, as well as 401 water quality certifications. And so I want to highlight that the tribe's water quality standards that had been in development and drafted for quite some time were eventually approved by tribal council and the EPA in 2022. And the tribe included standards for all water bodies within the reservation to avoid gaps or checkerboard coverage, but those apply to water bodies to the extent the tribe has jurisdiction. And water quality certifications, these complement water quality standards to ensure that the standards are upheld and not violated. And those mainly come about when federal permits or licenses are being sought to conduct work within waters of the U.S. within tribal boundaries. And I wanted to note too that the Environmental Programs Department has received authority from tribal council to act on behalf of the tribe to exercise their delegated authority for 401 certifications. And I also wanted to note that previously although authority was received in 2018, some of that authority was limited until the water quality standards were approved in 2022, allowing the tribe and the Environmental Programs Department to utilize the 4 key certification decisions available under Clean Water Act Section 401, whether to grant or grant with conditions, waive or deny certification. And I'll go into more details about that in just a moment. But first I wanted to kind of give you a broad overview of water quality programs. So as I mentioned, the Clean Water Act 106 program, that's focused on water pollution, and that mainly focuses on surface water and annual monitoring that's conducted across the reservation throughout the year. And there is some limited groundwater testing, that's mainly for wells and cisterns that are requested for tests from tribal members. And then there's also the WIN or Animas River program. WIN stands for Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act. And so that came about after the Gold King mine spill in 2015. And so that has mainly focused on water quality monitoring as well as research initiatives, mainly within the Animas Basin, but it's also part of a larger initiative in the broader San Juan watershed across with multiple states and tribes. The 319 program, and that focuses on non-point source pollution, mainly sediment and nutrients in the reservation, and working to address degradation or impairments that may be within water bodies, mainly through activities such as restoration activities or best management practices with agricultural producers, as well as conducting assessments and studies to note where non-point source pollution sources are prevalent and what kind of monitoring or restoration activities may be needed for that. And then we have the water quality standards, and those were approved in 2022, and those are required to go under review every 3 years, and so we're coming up on a triennial review that will need to be completed in 2025, and our team is already working to prepare for that. And then the 401 quality certification is the tribe's environmental programs department is the certifying authority for those certifications for projects that occur on tribal lands or waters. For non-tribal lands, such as fee or private lands or public lands with the U.S. Forest Service or BLM within the reservation boundaries, the certifying authority would be the Environmental Protection Agency. However, they consult and work with the tribe's environmental programs department closely with those projects to ensure that any kinds of water quality concerns that the tribe expresses with the project are incorporated in their 401 decision. I won't go into as much detail on the remediation programs as the water quality ones, but I do want to note that these are really important to enhance the tribe's environmental capacity, as well as assist in helping clean up potentially hazardous sites and providing direct services to tribal members, for example, indoor radon testing for tribal members. And so brownfields is, receives authority under this is testing my knowledge, let's see, CERCLA stands for, looking at my notes, the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, CERCLA, managed by EPA. And so that mainly focuses on cleaning up potentially hazardous sites on tribal land, whereas the General Assistance Program, or sometimes referred to as GAP, that serves as a tribal liaison for multiple agencies and other tribes and heads up the indoor radon testing that I mentioned. Then I wanted to go into more detail about our 106 program. And so again, this mainly focuses on surface water monitoring. And so the map shows that we collect monitoring data throughout the year, 10 months of the year. We don't collect data in December and January, mainly because difficulties with winter conditions to access sites, as well as concern that it could damage the instruments that we deploy. And so the 106 program, it's supported by 7 staff, mainly. I'm sorry, did I hear a question?
No, you're fine. It was just
going on. Okay. So this program is mainly supported by the tribe's 3 water quality standards, 1 water quality specialist and a water quality program manager. And so the tribe has been collecting water quality data since 1991, which is available on the water quality portal. And like I mentioned, we mainly focus on these 5 main river basins, the Plata, Animas, Pine, Piedra, and San Juan River, but we also sample on tributaries, particularly really important ones like the Florida or Stolzheimer Creek, as well as the Navajo and Rio Blanco rivers as well. And so the current sample design is that the monitoring water quality data and as well as biological and physical data are collected on a 3-year basis. And so for chemical data we're collecting grab samples that are analyzed for metals, nutrients, bacteria, algae. For biological data, we're collecting aquatic insects as well as algae. And then for physical data, mainly through riparian assessments focused on vegetation. And so we collect for nutrients monthly. Every quarter we collect metal sample. And we also deploy continuous water quality sondes as well, as you can see in the picture on the right. And so that's collecting ambient water quality conditions such as pH, temperature, conductivity, turbidity, dissolved oxygen, all of those things that may be necessary for us to calculate if water quality standards may be exceeding at that site. And so all of this data helps validate and inform our water quality standards. And then to complement the 106 program, we have the WIN or Animas River program, which again focuses on Animas River or the basin in the Animas. And that came about after the Gold King mine spill. But it really was set up, the funding was set up to create a long-term monitoring, research, and restoration program across the San Juan watershed. And so that's included other states and tribes like Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, the Navajo Nation, Southern Ute Tribe, and New Mountain Ute Tribe. And since 2018, the Southern Ute Tribe has received 3 grants through this funding source. It's no longer receiving congressional allocation. However, the tribe received multi-year grants, some of which extend through 2026. And so some of the grants have supported various activities. The first grant focused on water quality monitoring on the Animas River and Florida River. And much of the activities have focused within the reservation boundaries, but some of those have expanded into historical Ute lands, and so has helped fund ethnographic and plant toxicology assessments up in the Bonita Peak Mining District area, that are, some of which have been completed, some are ongoing. It's also helped cover, there was a saw telemetry site that was deployed on the Animas River that was working for a little while and then was struck by lightning, and then unfortunately we're unable to get that back up and running. And so it hasn't been as successful as the publicly available water quality or air quality monitoring stations, but we tried. And but other programs or other studies that the WIN program has focused on, it's worked with the U.S. Geological Survey to study nutrient and aluminum source tracking. Yeah, we've conducted emerging contaminant studies, so focusing on PFAS and pharmaceutical and personal care products. It's also helped with our 319 program to implement restoration projects and agricultural BMPs. So speaking of the 319 program, again, that one is focused on non-point source pollution. And so since 1997, 16 stream or riparian restoration projects have been completed. And so those are mainly focused on addressing eroded stream banks and enhancing riparian vegetation on multiple miles of stream channel on the reservation. And then it also supports agricultural best management practices. You can see over 1,100 acres within the reservation to reduce erosion and non-point source pollution. And so those have mainly focused on the Pine River watershed. As you can see from the map, it's various tributaries that feed into the Pine River. And just want to note that the cost share program that was active from 2004 to 2017, and then had a bit of break in funding and has been starting back up in 2022, and has served more than 55 participants, and that's not only tribal members, but that's also private landowners as well. And so certain activities that it's helped implement to reduce non-point source pollution include installing improved irrigation equipment, installing fencing, as you can see from this photo, so that's preventing grazing or cattle from using riparian areas to reduce erosion and things such as that. And then I'll move on to sorry I'm breezing through some of this, I want to be sensitive to time and leave ample time to answer questions as well. Lastly, I want to talk about the tribe's 401 Water Quality Certification Authority. So again, I want to reiterate this authority is really important to protect water bodies, but also to ensure the tribe's water quality standards aren't violated. And this map shows that in purple here, this is denoting tribal trust land. And so if a project occurs here, this is where the tribe's environmental programs division or department would be the certifying authority. If a project occurs in the areas that are outlined in green or yellow, and that are shaded a bit yellow, the certifying authority would be the Environmental Protection Agency. So again, these certifications are required when new federal permits or licenses are being requested within the reservation boundaries. Most commonly, those permits involve 404 permits from the Army Corps of Engineers or 402 permits from the Environmental Protection Agency. And so that's either there's going to be dredge and fill work within a waterway or there's going to be discharge into a waterway. And so since the water quality standards were approved in 2022, the tribe has issued 401 certifications for 7 projects and consulted with the EPA as a neighboring jurisdiction for 5 projects. And that's not including the multiple new 401 certifications that are currently in process and being reviewed. And the tribe is currently working to update its 401 procedures to ensure that we're tracking important things like the ever-evolving definition of the waters of the U.S., as well as the EPA's new 401 improvement rule to ensure that we're complying with all of those requirements. Last thing I just want to mention is that the tribe has really collected a wealth of water quality data since 1991 that really helps inform efforts across multiple counties and states. And we feel like these protections of the tribe's water quality standards and the 401 certifications really benefit water resources and environmental health throughout Plata County. And we just hope that we continue to have this great communication between the board and the tribe on activities such as notifications of spills into waterways or sampling or legislative efforts that may be going on within the county or the state. With that, I'll pass it over to Danny for his final comments, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Hi, thanks, Mandy. The slide right here, we want to give a little bit of a recap on some of the stuff we've talked about, and also just talk about how the county and the Board of Health can communicate with our environmental commission. But starting off, just again, wanted to reiterate that the tribe's air quality monitoring network really is adequate for serving this region in Plata County for ozone. That's something that's been, brought into question in the past, and we've had discussions with EPA about that. And EPA really does feel like that 3 monitors within the Plata County is pretty dense spacing for ozone. So the tribe's doing a good job with ensuring that this region stays compliant with the ozone standard. It's really important that we do. And as I mentioned, particulate matter with the increasingly occurring forest fires and dust storms that we see, it's just really a great resource that you can get on our website and see if particulate matter is unhealthy. We also show, aside from our continuous particulate monitors, we show there's a low-cost sensor called a purple air sensor, which is like a $200 air sensor. They do a really good job with particulate smoke, not a good job with dust, but there's a whole bunch of those within Durango and Plata County, and you can also, we have that on our website also. You can see the location of all of those and the values they're reading for particulate matter. And as far as communication with the commission, the county and the Board of Health can continue to communicate their concerns and their wishes to what they'd like to see happen on the reservation as far as air quality through their being a subdivision of the state and communication with the state-appointed commissioners to our environmental commission. So just want to make sure that the Board of Health is aware of that. And then I think the last thing I would just say is I really wanted to highlight the benefit that has happened with the tribe taking over the administration of Clean Air Act programs on the reservation. Because as I mentioned previously, the EPA just doesn't really have resources to do compliance and enforcement work on the reservation. And the tribe stepping in and doing that work and doing enforcement has really improved compliance, and it's also created a good deterrent that keeps regulated industry compliant moving forward. So I will wrap it up with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate this presentation. It's very impressive, and we really are grateful for the work you're doing to protect the environment. I'll just start to my right, and we'll just go down the board and see if we have questions for you, if you'll be open to those. With Director Wright.
Yes.
Hi, just very impressive. I guess the first thing I'd like to say is that when we have such a technical presentation, it would really help me to have the slides before. This was amazing. Y'all should be so proud of the work. We just came from Washington, D.C. on Tuesday night, and the theme was from the clinic to the Capitol. It was about advocacy and policy. So I'm aware of some of these topics. I can at least spell most of everything that was said today. But this is amazing work, and of course we know that all of these things that we've talked about in the abstract affect health, and it's just so important for the health of our children, vulnerable populations, and everything. I do have a few questions. I'd also like to just clap again. It seems like a lot of these efforts are unique to our state. I'm just very impressed. The first thing, with regard to the terms of the members, I'm assuming, how long are the terms? Is there a lot of stability within the commission of 6 members?
Yes, I can answer that. Well, each commissioner is appointed to, I believe, the 3-year term. The governor of the state of Colorado appoints the state commissioners, and the tribal council appoints the tribal council commissioners. As in any commission, we've had good luck sometimes, and not so good luck sometimes, but it seems to be pretty stable. As Danny mentioned, I would encourage you to engage with your environmental commissioners from the state. They're really good, and you can relay, and they can kind of keep you up to date. And we'll also ensure that when we try to have about 2 meetings of the commission each year. So we'll try to make sure that, we will make sure that the Plata County Health Board is included.
Thank you. The other thing, when we talked about the composition of the tasks, it seems like they were divided. The tribe had jurisdiction, and I think it was labeled as an environmental commission. So do the 6 members work together or separately on?
Yeah, let me try to clarify that. So the commission is tasked with the representation. They seek out and recommend the programs, as Danny mentioned, the Title V or the minor source program, as you've heard. They are and they oversee the appeals. The day-to-day groundwork of doing inspections, writing permits, and doing enforcement is up to the Reservation Air Program, which is a arm or a department of the tribe. So the commission oversees the programs and the appeals. The Reservation Air Program, Danny and his team carry out the legwork of the program. Does that make sense?
It does. And I don't want to monopolize my questions, so I'll just ask one more, because I know my smart board members will think of the civil penalties on enforcement. Are those substantial with the formal cases that were, what is the dollar amount? I'm just curious.
Yes, as Danny mentioned, we follow the EPA's civil penalty policy. If you go to our website, we also have enforcement procedures and penalty manual that's available to the public. It's on our website. The penalties can vary these are major sources now, mind you. These are large sources. So some of the penalties range from, we've had some in the $15,000 to $16,000 up to the $170,000. And, I don't know over the course of our work that we've done, but it's been a substantial amount. And when you definitely do not want a civil penalty, and that is, as Danny mentioned, part of the deterrent, along with our inspections, to require facilities to stay in compliance with the Clean Air Act.
Thank you. I'm very impressed. Thank you.
Director Wright.
I just have one question. You referenced a monitoring system that when the air quality is poor, that the public is notified. Is that an automatic in a certain area? How does one get onto that monitoring and alert system?
Yes, let me go back and say that our information that Danny pointed out on the website, that's real-time information. It may have like a 4-second delay, but the instruments that we operate specifically for the particulate matter, those instruments are like $100,000. They're really expensive and hard to maintain. As far as alerts go, there is no alert system. We don't have that ability to send out, say, a text or a email or anything like that. The alert is on our webpage, and it will show, as Danny mentioned, an index. So it ranges from green to red, and so you can imagine red is the worst. And so to get an alert, the tribe, we do alert within our own system to tribal members, but with the county, we don't have that ability, and I would encourage you, it's free to the Board of Health. Our instruments cost a lot to keep running and a lot to maintain, and I would encourage you to use it. It's a really good tool.
Thank you.
All right, Director Sigenswall.
Thank you. Again, very informative presentation and really appreciate all the work that you and your teams do. A couple questions. I think this is more geared towards Danny, unless Mark, you're able to answer it. I think back on slide 5 or 6, you were talking about the Clean Air Water Act and you have the map of all the wells. I'm curious, what's the percentage of wells that are on tribal lands that are youth owned or run, and what's the percentage of private or leased? I'm just kind of curious, just for knowledge.
I'm not sure. Danny might have that answer. I'll let him look while we're talking. But you know, as you know, that Red Willow, the tribe, they own quite a few wells, but they I wouldn't say it was. You know, it wouldn't be all of them. Hillcore has some. I can't remember all, but I would say probably my estimate would be about half. Danny might correct me. That are you. Some of the larger facilities that Danny talks about, those Title V facilities, I would say that the biggest sources are not the tribes. Williams, or actually now it's Harvest Ignacio Gas Plant, as Danny mentioned, it is the largest source within the reservation. And within the process flare, as he mentioned, is the biggest emission source or potential emission source. So, Danny, do you want to comment?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know offhand how many of those wells belong to the tribe, but my estimation would be less than half of the ones on the reservation. I think Matt Wampler just sent me a message. He said about 513 of them. So I think I said there was, not looking at the slide right now, 2,000 something, and the tribe has about 500 of those.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. That's interesting information. I think the other question I have related to that is how many operators are we talking? 10, 20 operators? Or are we talking, 100 operators? Just general estimation.
Yeah.
Not sure offhand on the total number of operators, but I'd say that as far as the operators that own the majority of the wells, it's probably only maybe 10 or 15 companies. There's probably easily 20 plus different operators that we make contact with, that we're aware of through our emission inventory and regulatory work, but a lot of those operators are pretty small. They might only own a couple of wells. I'd say the majority of wells are owned by Simcoe, Corp, the tribe, Enduring Resources, Catamount, some of the big ones.
Thank you. And again, I have lots of questions, so I will limit them. In regards to the ozone, I mean, how do we compare to other rural areas within Colorado? I know like 70 parts per million is kind of the EPA standard threshold. We're around 66 on the Bondet site. Just curious, I know we do have a higher propensity for higher ozone levels here. How do we really compare to other rural areas in the state?
I'll start and then I'll let Danny lead into that. I wouldn't concur with the statement that we have higher ozones than compared to the rest of the state. Ozone levels are actually here pretty stable, and as Danny mentioned, we've actually seen a decrease a little bit over the last 8 years. With respect to maybe the Front Range, where you have the natural gas that is being produced there, has a whole different content than the coal bed methane we have here. The methane we have in this region, or the natural gas, is 98% methane, whereas on the Front Range, they've got a lot of liquids or condensate that are included, which includes xylene, benzene, ethylbenzene, toluene, those types of HAPs. So, you know, the gas formation that's over the Front Range is considerably different than here. So that's why, and you add that transportation, you know, the Front Range has got Colorado Springs and Denver and Fort Collins all the way up. So you have a lot of transportation and industrial sources. So they have a real problem with ozone and smog and particulate as well. So Danny, would you like to add?
Sure, thanks, Mark. Oh, sorry about that, I just muted myself. Yeah, Mark, I would agree. I don't know exactly about how we compare to other rural areas of Colorado as far as ozone concentrations go, but, you know, we're well under the standard of 70 parts per billion, and the long-term trend over the last 20 years is actually going down. Why? I'm not quite sure. You know, the power plants in New Mexico are being phased out. Those are a huge oxides of nitrogen source. Could be a contributing factor, don't know, but our trends are going down slightly. Without a big change in industry here, it seems pretty unlikely we'll see that reverse. You know, as Mark mentioned, it's a totally different deal than the Front Range. I mean, the Front Range just got downgraded from a extreme ozone non-attainment area, which is the highest designation you could get. It just got downgraded to a severe, but you know, they regularly have ozone design values in the, you know, above 100 parts per billion. They're facing a long road to achieving the 70 part per billion standard, whereas down here, we're keeping an eye on it. We know our emission sources and are well postured to create rules to lower ozone precursor emissions, should there be a need.
Yeah, and I'd like to add one last thing in that, you know, we do a good job as far as the regulation and working on the reservation. We do have ozone, or excuse me, VOC transport. A lot of it from the northern New Mexico is still within the basin. So, you know, you get VOCs and air knows no boundaries. So, you know, we work here to reduce emissions within the reservation, but we don't have much control outside of the state, obviously. We do our program because the state of New Mexico is in proximity to the reservation. Anytime they issue a permit for one of their Title V sources, we do a review of that permit, an effective program, and so my staff is really good at reviewing those permits, and matter of fact, have caught some omissions by the state of New Mexico in some of their permits, which we were glad to work with the state on. So, does that help?
Yeah, thank you so much, and I really appreciate all the work, and to Mandy, really appreciate you keeping our water clean and monitoring the water quality. I know it's a patchwork, so it's a little challenging between the EPA and you, so thank you all again.
Thanks, Director Vernon Sheldon. Sorry.
Thank you, Mark and Danny and Mandy. I don't have any further questions. I'm just absorbing all this information right now. I would appreciate an opportunity for an introduction at some point to the commission. I think that's a great idea. I appreciate that suggestion, Mark. And it sounds like you all have really stepped in to monitor the air and water quality, especially with that 85% of those oil and gas wells operating within the tribal land. I understand and appreciate that vested interest. So thank you again for speaking with us today.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you. We take our job seriously. You know, we work for the tribe, but we all feel like that we work for the county and the whole region. We recognize that we have the bulk of the industrial resources here. And so, you know, like I said, the tribe comes first, but we do represent everyone, and we appreciate working with the county and Ms. Rogers and you.
Well, thank you so much for that philosophy. That really means a lot to us. And again, thank you so much for spending your time with us today, and we look forward to future interactions.
Thank you. We'll see you later.
Could I just ask if
Thank
we
you.
get the slides, is that possible?
Yeah, as Carly received them earlier, they're in the packet, we can also email them to you.
Great.
I think you posted them to
They are not in the packet
They're not in the
yet,
packet?
but I
Okay.
did not see them.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you.
Yeah, we received
I'll-
them this afternoon, but
I'll
we
send-
haven't posted.
I sent those to Carly. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, thank you so much. We'll now move on to item 8652, respiratory diseases update. This is,
We lost our connection.
oh, are we still online?
Yeah, you're still online. Sometimes it takes a second to switch camera views.
Oh,
It's
sure.
okay.
Okay, and
Unless the planners are interested in respiratory diseases, you're welcome to leave it.
yeah, thank you all very much for joining us today. It's nice to see you, and we look forward to seeing you again. Appreciate you being here. And Tracy, I'll let you introduce the team.
Well, first of all, I'm Tracy Anselmo, I'm the interim public health director at the Plata County Public Health Department. Everybody should be interested in respiratory diseases because we all fall victim to them. The tracking of flu and RSV cases for this season officially began on October 1st, 2023 and is continual for COVID-19. Notice I didn't try to say RSV as its actual title because I can't do that. Let's see, respiratory disease activity in the United States remains high despite the recent declines in some indicators, and in January, influenza or flu was the respiratory virus causing the most emergency department visits nationally. Given the timing of this information and the impacts of respiratory illnesses we are experiencing ourselves, we had a whole bunch of folks out recently with illnesses, I requested this update for you all. And we are joined today by Sammy Stevens, the Plata County Public Health Department's epidemiologist, who will review the status of respiratory diseases locally in La Plata County and compare and contrast those two state rates. Brian Devine, the Environmental Health and Communicable Disease Manager, Adrian Azu, officer are also present in the audience today. Sammy?
Thank you for that intro, Tracy. All right. Okay. Thank you for your time today. I'm Sammy Stevens, epidemiologist, and I'll jump right in. Let's see. Okay. Before I jump into exactly the trends of what we're seeing locally in our community, I thought it would be a good idea to take a step back and tell you a little bit about our respiratory disease surveillance program. So we do track the three most commonly circulating viruses during respiratory season, COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2 virus, RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, and then influenza. For each of these diseases, we track several different indicators. Typically for surveillance, there's no one perfect data point that tells us exactly what is happening in our community. So we try to look at it from several different angles. Here on this slide, I have the different data points that we collect for each of these diseases. For all three diseases, we track hospitalizations and outbreaks. Hospitalizations are a really great indicator because it tells us for the individuals who are the sickest in our community, what virus is making them sick, what's causing them to go to the hospital. Outbreaks are a really great indicator because it tells us what's circulating and causing clusters of illness throughout the community. We definitely can have an outbreak or have a virus that's circulating and it's making a large group of people sick, but they're not sick enough to go to the hospital. And then lastly, we do have information on deaths. We do track this a little bit differently depending on the disease. For COVID-19, we do, since it's a newer virus, as we all know. It's something we track deaths in all ages, but for flu and RSV, which have been around for several years, we just track the pediatric deaths. For COVID-19, we do have an additional surveillance data point that we look at, which is the individual case counts. During the pandemic, you may have become accustomed to looking at, X amount of cases this week, and we tried really hard during the pandemic to encompass all of the cases, or at least all of them that we could count. As we have, COVID-19 has become more of a everyday illness, I guess you could say. We no longer are capturing absolutely every single illness, but we are able to capture cases that are getting diagnosed from medical providers. With the abundance of at-home tests, there's no way we could capture all of those. And then lastly, for influenza, we do have a way to track. So for that surveillance data point, we have 4 partners in the community, 4 outpatient clinics who report to us just aggregate numbers. How many people did they test for flu this week, and how many are coming back positive? That's kind of a simpler way to get at, how many people are sick enough to go to the doctor, but not sick enough to be hospitalized. This slide right here, it has a lot of information, but the main things I want to point out here is for COVID, RSV, and influenza, there's a lot of overlapping symptoms. So for all 3 illnesses, you can get a fever, a cough, and a runny nose, or runny or stuffy nose, or congestion. Because of that, the only way to really tell what you have is to take a test. I can't be like, oh, you have a fever. You definitely have this one disease. It's no. We really got to take a test. And then there's a few different characteristics here. The one I really want to point out is the incubation periods and the infectious periods. They're different per disease, and because of that, it really changes our public health recommendations of our public health recommendations of how to stop the spread. So next, to jump in and show you some actual data, here I have our hospitalization trends for just Plata County. Since October 1st, we've had 48 COVID-19 hospitalizations, 6 RSV hospitalizations, and then 5 influenza-associated hospitalizations. To orient you to this graph, the blue line is COVID-19, the green line is RSV, and the yellow line is flu. In this graph, what I want to draw to your attention is on the far left, you can see in the beginning of our respiratory season, which would have been in October, it was really a lot of COVID-19 hospitalizations that we were seeing. But as we got into the end of December, we started to see just a combined some flu in there and some RSV and still some COVID. Really interestingly, if you look at this data from another point of view and you look at the age groups that are being hospitalized, each disease is affecting different groups. So for our RSV hospitalizations, these tend to be in young kiddos. In fact, all the hospitalizations for RSV that are portrayed on this slide were in kiddos under the age of 12. For the COVID-19 hospitalizations, we're actually seeing kind of the opposite. We're seeing a lot of hospitalizations in older adults. In all the data portrayed here, over 80% of these individuals who were hospitalized for COVID were over the age of 60. And then for influenza hospitalizations, it's kind of split. We are seeing about half in children and half in adults. This slide is the same data, except for it's zoomed out. It's for the entire state of Colorado. To orient you to this graph a little bit, the vertical line that's on the right side of this graph, that's going to show you where October 1st is of 2023, which is where the last graph started. COVID-19 is the teal line, flu is the purple line, and RSV is the green line. So with here, it's a very similar trend. This is where I think it's really cool. We can see like our local trends match the state trends. So beginning of October, we mostly saw in the state of Colorado just COVID-19 hospitalizations. But then later as the season went on, December, early January, that's when we started to see RSV and flu come in. What I wanted to point out here in this graph, interestingly, since it's for the entire state of Colorado, the population size is much larger. So here you can see an actual, it looks like, appears to be a peak in flu and a peak in RSV, and even in COVID, and it looks like we're on a decline. Next, I just touch on outbreaks. Since October 1st, locally, just in Plata County, we've had 3 outbreaks of COVID-19 reported and 3 of RSV outbreaks. We have not had any influenza outbreaks reported so far. Interestingly, the age groups affected by these outbreaks matches also our hospitalization trends. Our COVID-19 outbreaks, all 3 of them were in long-term care facilities. Our RSV outbreaks were all in child care facilities. And then here again, you can see we had the COVID outbreaks, which are in blue, in the beginning of the season, and starting in January, we start to see some RSV outbreaks. This is this switching gears now to look at cases reported to us. So as a reminder, we track COVID-19 cases reported from medical providers, and this can be hospitalizations, urgent cares, outpatient facilities, all of them. And you can see here, it looks like we did have some sort of peak of COVID activity at the end of October, and it's been on a decline. This last week, we did see just a little bit of an uptick of cases reported. It's kind of too early to tell if that's just the up and down of the trends, or if that is something the aftermath of our snowdown activities or something like that. Since the beginning of this year, we have already had 75 COVID-19 cases reported. This is my last slide on trends. From our Sentinel medical sites who send us their aggregate data on flu testing. From this data set, it actually looks like we're still inclining on influenza. We haven't seen a decline yet, but as time goes on, and we'll see, hopefully it's not too much longer. We do like to track this data through May because there's definitely a chance that influenza is a virus that sometimes shows 2 peaks per season. There's 2 strains of influenza. There's influenza A and influenza B. Oftentimes we'll see a peak of influenza A, and we think it's over, and then influenza B sneaks up. Interestingly, in our last week, we did see a 50-50 split of 50% of the positives were for influenza A and 50% were for influenza B. And then I wanted to end on this slide to just give you a little bit of information of what we do with all of this data in our community. Specifically, we did some outreach to our high-risk settings, especially our child care facilities, making sure they're aware that we're in the health department and who to contact. We have a lot of public health guidance to provide to these settings to help them slow the spread. And then when they do have outbreaks, we do have an epi coordinator, and his main role is to work with these facilities and make sure they have all the information and the tools to stop the spread. We did a press release about a week ago, not sure if you saw it, but we did kind of give like a PSA to the community, letting them know we're seeing an increase of RSV outbreaks. When we're getting reports of RSV outbreaks in the child care settings, it makes us really think that there's a lot of RSV probably spreading out in the community as well. And then lastly, we just launched a new respiratory data dashboard, which is this screenshot here on the right, and it's publicly available to everybody. And with that, I can take any questions.
All right, we'll start with down here at this end this time.
Hey, Sam, just a quick question. Can you refresh my memory on what constitutes an outbreak?
Sure, yeah, it's good question. It does vary a little bit by disease and by setting. So for example, for care setting, it can just be 2 or more cases within a 14-day period. However, in the same setting for COVID-19, it would be 5 cases. I know that's a little bit difficult when we're comparing these outbreaks to each other because we define outbreaks a little bit different. But the reason why we define them differently is because of the severity of the illness that it causes, and then severity, and then how fast it spreads. So for COVID-19, usually if we have 2 cases, it's very rare it's going to stay at 2 cases. It's usually going to quickly blow up into 5 or more cases.
Just to follow up with I'm forgetting the name of the coordinator who's reaching out to, let's say, the child care facility, what's that follow-up look like to confirm that the outbreak has ceased?
Sure, so we do, part of following up and helping facilities with outbreaks is, one, giving them public health recommendations of like, who should be excluded from school, for how long, or if it's long-term care facility, how long should the healthcare workers,
Well, they would not let me speak. I showed up at the Larkspur training room, and they would not let me speak. Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Doing well. Can I get a public records request form, please?
You can do that online. Do you want me to tell you the website address?
I'm sure I can do it online. Do you have a form I could have to fill out here, please? I'm doing well. How are you, Kevin?
How you been? I didn't notice, I didn't recognize you there. How you doing?
Doing well. How's your day?
Very good.
Right on. Hey, thank you.
What's this all about?
That's a camera.
Well,
A couple.
I see that. What's happening?
I'm filling out a records request. What's happening with you?
No, I mean, what are you recording?
I'm recording where the cameras are facing. So recording me and whatever's around me.
Okay. Like, can we help you with something? I don't.
Well, I don't need any help. Thanks anyways.
Okay.
Here's my record request. Can I get your name and position, please?
My name is Logan Kinzer and I'm the licensing coordinator.
Okay, thanks. You could just
I'll
forward
give
that.
this to the person that processes these.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate you. All right, guys. I'm gonna end the live stream. Sorry to make that such a long one, but I was hoping to get some public comments in there, but they wouldn't even entertain it when I showed up late. So anyways, have a nice day. Press for transparency.